Well, I'm a fan of brownies, if you didn't notice. I probably could have eaten at least half that pan. I'm generally always a fan of a good meal. Eric and I enjoy sampling food from all over the world. We love coming to your homes and your gatherings and tasting the food from your countries and cultures. We love the fellowship that happens around a table with good friends or new friends. I may have shared with you before that one of the most memorable meals I've ever had in my life was at my sister's wedding in Italy. Gosh, it's been I think 6 years ago now. And the wedding was held in a very small town, a place probably even a lot smaller than like Groton. I actually couldn't think of a small enough town in Massachusetts to compare it to, but a very small town, way off of the usual tourist path. So my sister and her husband-to-be, they didn't get the tourist treatment, but they got a real Italian wedding. According to the menu for the meal that night, it was supposed to be 7 courses. But if you were keeping count, no less than 11 different dishes came out. And that's not even including the dessert buffet. The feast was long and leisurely. There was time to get up and walk around and visit between one course and the next. By the end of the evening, our bellies and our hearts were just absolutely full, almost bursting. Maybe my love for eating a good meal is one of the reasons I've always been drawn to the feeding miracles and the banquet parables of Jesus. That feeding of 5,000 story is one of the most beloved stories about Jesus. It's one of only a few stories that's retold by all 4 evangelists. And in all 4 cases, the heart of the story is almost exactly the same. In all 4 Gospels, the story is about the power of Jesus and about the provision of God. It's a story that reminds us how much our God can accomplish if only we will offer what we have, however insignificant it might seem. It's a story that challenges us to see possibility instead of seeing scarcity. It's a story that challenges us to confront the problems in the world instead of turning away in despair. But when Matthew tells this story, this feeding of 5,000 story, he sets it up a little bit differently than the other evangelists. I always like to pay attention to how one evangelist does things a little differently than the others. I think it's a good clue to what they might want you to think about when you read their story. We get our clue from Matthew in the very first verse of today's reading. It started like this, if you didn't catch it. Now when Jesus heard this, he withdrew from there. When Jesus heard what? To answer that question, we have to back up a little bit and look at the first 12 verses of Matthew chapter 14. It goes like this. At that time, Herod the ruler heard reports about Jesus. And he said to his servants, "This is John the Baptist. He has been raised from the dead, and for this reason these powers are at work in him." For Herod had arrested John, bound him, and put him in prison on account of Herodias, his brother Philip's wife, because John had been telling Herod that it's not lawful for you to have her. In other words, Herod had been messing around with his brother's wife, and John said, no, it's not right. Herod wanted to put John to death, but he feared the crowd because they regarded John as a prophet. But when Herod's birthday came, the daughter of Herodias danced before the company, and she pleased Herod so much that he promised on oath to grant her whatever she might ask, even up to half of his kingdom. Prompted by her mother, she said, "Give me the head of John the Baptist on a platter." The king was grieved. Yet, out of regard for his oaths and for his guests, he commanded it to be given. He sent and had John beheaded in the prison. The head was brought on a platter and given to the girl, who brought it to her mother. His disciples came and took the body and buried it. Then they went and told Jesus. When Jesus heard this, the news of his cousin's brutal death is the context of Jesus' grief-stricken withdrawal to a deserted place. This is the news that is filling Jesus' heart, even as he manages to have compassion on a relentless crowd who will not let him be. The report of Herod's deadly and grotesque banquet must be fresh on Jesus' mind as he breaks 5 loaves and 2 fish to feed 5,000 hungry men. In Matthew's gospel, the feeding of 5,000 is not a story of 1 feast, but of 2. In the first feast, we see it's the feast of those who always have plenty to eat, celebrating with an even bigger party. Herod, he's the emissary of Rome. He's not Caesar, but he acts with the emperor's authority. When John the Baptist questions Herod's moral integrity, Herod has John arrested. To make sure that his power and his position are secure, Herod must keep the peace and save face at any cost. In this case, the cost is the head of John the Baptist, literally, on a silver platter. Herod's banquet, it is certainly the place to see and be seen in Jerusalem. But it's also a death-giving meal, marked by intrigue and tyranny. The second feast, of course, is the one that has become beloved in the hearts of modern disciples. We see a crowd hungry for physical, food, and spiritual wholeness. These are mostly subsistence farmers or laborers who take to heart very much the way that Jesus taught them to pray for daily bread. They are people who Rome ignores, except when it comes time to collect in a system of unjust taxation. They are the ones who bear the heaviest burden when teachers of the law inflict ever stricter interpretations of the Torah. They are the ones on whom Jesus has compassion. In this feast, the meal is a simple fisherman's diet: tilapia and bread. But miraculously, everyone is satisfied. This is the meager feast of nobodies, but it's also a life-giving meal that embodies the gracious abundance of God. Bringing these 2 stories together, Matthew makes it easy for us to see that there are still 2 feasts being celebrated in our world today. There is the feast of the powerful who always have plenty and celebrate with lavish extravagance. It's the feast of those who can take care of themselves, and then some. The people at this table are the powerful elite, the ones who can pull strings and turn heads. But the people at this table also see others as expendable, tools or toys to be used for their own pleasure or power seeking. They are the ones who not only have power, but who manipulate it or abuse it to make sure their place is secure. They are the ones who delight in another's suffering, or at the very least, ignore it. When they stand on shaky moral ground, they face few consequences. And then there's the other feast. It's the feast of the week. It's the feast of those whose voice goes unheard and whose pocketbooks are usually empty. Of those who have enough, barely have enough, but manage to share. The people at that table, at this table, are hardly important in the eyes of the movers and shakers in the world. They get lip service, but very little relief from the powers that be. When they make mistakes, they pay for them. But the people at this table, they know the value of community. They care for their families and their neighbors, even at their own expense. They show deep compassion for the pain of the people around them, and they receive compassion from their friends and neighbors. They have unreasonable faith that God will provide for their needs, not with extravagance, but with enough. This banquet is not elaborate, but is marked with prayers of thanksgiving and songs of joy. In Matthew's Gospel, the feeding of 5,000 is not a story about one feast, but about two. And as followers of Jesus living in the United States of America today, you and I have choices about which banquet we will attend. For those of us who were born in this country to middle-class parents, and let's be honest, especially to middle-class white parents, our invitations arrived with our birth certificates. We don't need to pretend that's not true. But even if you came to this country later as an immigrant, or if you've come out of poverty or are living in poverty, you still have a choice about which banquet you will pursue. Herod's banquet beckons. It whispers that if you talk the right way, if you drive the right car, if you cultivate the right friends, maybe you could be welcome at this banquet too. But Herod's banquet does not care if you must deny your culture to fit in. It does not care if you go into crushing debt to pull off the look. It doesn't care whether the right friends are actually good for you. I will tell you that I have looked with longing at that lavish, extravagant feast with its endless courses of food, its 10-piece brass band, its fine china and elegant dances. I've stood outside the door, fingering my own invitation, wondering whether I should go inside. Should I make the right friends, buy the right clothes, contribute to the right causes? There remains a sin-scarred part of me that likes the idea of acceptance and power and privilege, not to mention fine foods and a good party. But I'm not willing to make the trade-off. I'm not willing to live with the constant insecurity that comes with wondering whether I will remain a welcome guest. I cannot ignore people who never received an invitation and stand just out of sight, just around the corner, starving. And I will not laugh when the platter comes by, serving up the head of my neighbor. That is what Herod's banquet asks of you. So instead, I am striving in my own life to answer another invitation. One that I received not at my birth, but at my baptism. I will join the feast of the weak and the least, because that's the feast of Jesus. And while the people around this table may not have a 12-course dinner, they may not even have a table. While they may not have a 12-course dinner, it turns out that everyone is full. And so I will be generous. They may not have a brass band, but they will sing the songs of their heart. And so I will offer the song of my heart, even if it is a little off key. The people around this table might not have much political influence, but there is tremendous power in their compassion for one another and in their faith in the provision of God. And so I will care for my neighbors and trust God to give me what I need. If you want to wear the right things to this banquet, put on a heart of mercy. The right friends for this party are whichever people are sitting beside you. The right cause is the cause of your neighbor in need. We live, friends, in a land of absolute incredible abundance. We have access to more technology, more natural resources, and more global power than any of Jesus' followers who have ever lived. Like Matthew, we live in a land of 2 feasts. But probably unlike Matthew, we have 2 invitations in our hands: Herod's invitation and Jesus. So with all of my food-loving heart, I hope that you will turn away from the pursuit of Herod's delicacies and join me in the simple, compassionate, abundant, joyful, and welcoming table that Jesus has spread before us. Come, because at Jesus' feast there is always room for one more. May it be so. Amen.